Hello everyone. So the first thing I want to address is something that I talked about in my previous ranting video about gatekeeping. And specifically I want to talk about the fact that I am actually part of the problem here. So something that was brought up to me, and I don't know if it was about my video specifically, but it was talked about on Reddit like shortly after my video came out, and I kind of wonder if someone was watching my video and then commented about it there. Talk to me. I will gladly address all of these issues if that's what happened. Otherwise, it is something that I do need to address. I talked a lot in my coming out video and in my last month's video about, all my ranting about gatekeeping, about how no one would want to be trans and that no one would choose to be like this. And I wasn't totally clear on this point. You do not have to hate being trans to be a valid trans person. There are certain advantages to being trans. In my case, having been assigned male at birth, I tend to be very aware when someone is treating me differently as a woman because I lived with that privilege of presenting masculine most of my life. I know the difference. Anyway, the point is that you do not have to hate being trans in order to be trans. That is not a thing. I'm talking about my own experience, and I need to be more clear about that because I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't be proud of their trans identity. I mean, come on, there's a trans pride flag behind me. The other thing that I said in a couple of my videos about this is that I always knew from the time I was 5, and that is not always the case. It is very okay if you did not always know. You're valid whatever time in your life you figured this out. For me, it was such an issue growing up and something that I was repressed with actively, that I was frankly abused over. So for me, the fact that I still felt this way through all of that abuse when there was a clear, obvious advantage to me not being this way meant that I had to kind of pay more attention to it. In a way, I actually owe my abusers some thanks because they made me really clear on this point that this is who I am. I had to fight for it all the time. And the thing is that if I had been fully conscious of the fact that I was a woman, it would have been much more frustrating for me growing up with that knowledge. Like, yes, looking back on it, there were signs for my case and like things that make more sense now in light of knowing that I am a woman, but the reality is I could not have transitioned in that environment and I would never have been happy. It would have been just another thing that I couldn't address. And it was that, for sure, but like knowing what it was and what the solution was and that there was an option and not being able to act on it would have really hurt me more than living in denial as I did. We often say in this community that every transition is different. And for me, part of my transition was knowing from a very early age and having this be a persistent thing in my life. That is not the case for every other person. And I want to be very clear that that does not make you any less valid or any less trans or any of that kind of nonsense. I actively do not want to gatekeep people, and I understand the tendency to do that because we're so wrapped up in our own experiences that that tends to happen. And I apologize to everyone who I might have upset with that. The next thing I want to rant about is gender-neutral terms, because what a lot of people think of as gender-neutral terms are things like guys for a group of people and dude for a person. For me, it's very hurtful when someone thinks of me with a masculine term, which both guy and dude are, in my opinion, masculine terms. In the case of dude, I will make an exception if you are actively currently holding a surfboard. That is it. But the thing is that I also recognize that guys for a group of people is such an ingrained thing in our society, and I really wish it wasn't, and I do actively work to unravel that in my own speech patterns. But when someone tells you, please do not call me a guy, it is now on you to respect that. Like, that is a reasonable request for especially a woman to make, but any person. I also recognize my own sensitivity in this issue because, like, obviously I was assigned male at birth, and obviously it's going to bother me if I have the perception that someone is interpreting this as a guy. That's something I'm always going to be sensitive to, at least right now. I don't know about the future, but for now, it's a sensitive thing for me, and if I ask you, please don't call me guy, you should respect that, and it's kind of that simple. And people will fight you on this point. They will say, I have the right to say whatever I want. Well, yeah, you have the right to be a jerk, but please don't, you know? It's just sort of this boundary thing. I think people need to respect each other and their boundaries, and for me, being referred to by male terms, even if you don't intend them as a gender, specific thing, that is my boundary. And if you are not respecting that, and I'm not asking you to, like, just know that. I'm saying if I tell you, please do not do that, and you continue to do that, it will hurt me. And if you want to hurt me, that is your choice, and you do have that freedom. But I will not be interacting with you anymore after that because I don't want to get hurt. And there's a whole set of pronouns that people actively refuse to use for people, and I don't understand that. Like, some people actively refuse to use they and them pronouns to refer to a singular person. And that is just not grammatically correct. That is a thing that has always been a thing in our language, and if you don't know that, then you just haven't seen much of our language. But like, either way, again, this comes back to an issue of respect. If a person asks you to use these particular pronouns when referring to them, and you actively decide to not do that, you are being disrespectful. And it's not like you should just know that on the surface. I understand where that's a concern, but I think we also need to be a little reasonable about this. That is a thing that should be established and then followed. That's it. And there are some what other people would describe as exotic pronouns, like zim and zur and those kinds of pronouns, and all kinds of other things that I'm sure I've never heard of. And again, either avoid using pronouns altogether, which is very possible with very minimal effort, or use their pronouns or stop being friends with that person, because at the end of the day, you're just hurting them. And I don't really have much else to rant about this month. Fortunately, I'm trying to keep this a little shorter, especially with how long a lot of the content on my channel has gotten lately. So first, on the more medical side, coming up this month, I will be getting my levels checked again. So I'll be trying to figure out how the progesterone has impacted things, whether my prolactin has gone down enough that I am no longer at risk for a brain tumor, which is a super fun, scary thing to think about. The other thing I'm actually a little concerned about is that I wonder if adding the progesterone, which is a testosterone blocker, into the mix while keeping my spironolactone at the same level that it was previously might actually have tipped my testosterone too low, because it was pretty low even for the female range when I last got tested, and lately I've been just feeling unbelievably tired. And I also understand that I am going through a second puberty, and puberty is exhausting because your body's doing all this work and working overtime to get everything going, and I have to say, I think that's going pretty well. But like, I also understand that you can actually go too low with your T, and I do need to worry about that, so I'm really kind of curious what the tail of the levels will be. Continuing on the medical news, I have had my second session of laser hair removal. The first session was incredibly painful. Honestly, it reminded me of some really triggering stuff, and mostly my focus was on just not having a panic attack from the level of pain. Fortunately, they do get easier with time in a particular region because there's less hair physically there, and the second time I knew what to expect. I had a stress ball, and I brought my stuffed animal with me, and I was just like in the right headspace for it and everything, and I was like, all right, we're gonna get through this. So the combination of those took the pain level from an 8 out of 10 with the first session down to about a 6 out of 10, and it's not pleasant. But the good news is that, like, once you're done actually doing the laser on a particular area, the pain stops almost immediately. You know, so pretty much by the time you're back out to your car from leaving your session, all the pain is gone and you're through it, and it's over, it's done. Yeah, so the technician who was working on my face asked me, how is your progress with the laser going? And I said, I literally can't tell the difference. You know, I mean, I have dysphoria. I literally have a disorder that tells me this situation is worse than it actually is. So if you tell me there are patches missing, I will believe you. But from my perspective, as long as I actually have to shave every single day, I'm not going to notice a difference. And the interesting thing is that since starting hormones, especially the levels that I'm at, my hair growth has slowed ridiculously slow. Like, before I could probably pull off every 2 days shaving. Now I could probably go a heck of a lot longer if I was presenting masculine, but because I'm presenting female and I want to have no facial hair ever, I'm shaving every single day, which, by the way, is incredibly rough on your skin, which has gotten a lot thinner and is not really okay with having a bunch of blades run over it a bunch. And yeah, so it's really irritating my skin, and I definitely need to be addressing this. The one thing I have noticed that I'm not really sure is normal is that, like, for the next couple of days after a session with laser, I feel like my facial hair is like way more visible, and I kind of wonder if that's like skin getting burned off or something like that, or if it's just the dead hair that's been, you know, cut by burning, like poking out more, and I don't really know. So I don't know if that's incredibly normal, but yeah. And of course, it could just be psychological, because I'm like trying to remove this hair and it's still visible and it's still there, and I'm like, oh, just die, go away! I never wanted you in the first place! Again, keeping with the medical side, you know, I am very sore. I can't handle hugging people, it just hurts too much. I am very, very sore in my chest, and that is apparently very normal and apparently going to last me the better part of the next year and a half after this, so 2 years total. Which is just, well, you know, it's a thing, and, you know, it's puberty. Puberty is not fun, and, I mean, don't get me wrong, this is better than the last puberty I did, for sure, because I, like, want these changes, but, like, oh, it is still a pain, quite literally. And I'm still trying to get used to like the spatial differences, because like I keep whacking myself into things or whacking myself with my own hands and stuff, you know, and that always floors me, which is super fun. You know, it's just, this is a lot of change in a very short period of time after a long period of my life of this not being a problem. You know, I went the first 28 years of my life without this particular problem and getting to know my body very closely and everything, and I keep whacking into things because things are different. Like, I've whacked my hips into walls, I've whacked my chest into everything, and I'm just like... I've had a couple of friends be like, how close were you walking to these walls? What are the margins you were dealing with in your life? You know, it's just that sort of thing where, like, you're just not aware of your body. And it is a lot like being a teenager in that way, because everything's like you're taller and like things are moving around, and it's all very disorienting. Like, my sense of balance has changed completely. On my way into work, I tend to walk along the curb to just try to walk in a straight line and balance on there. And some days it goes great, and other days I'm just a mess, you know? It's a lot. It's an adjustment, you know, especially in heels. So, moving on to the more legal side of my transition. So like 2 months ago, I got a call from my doctor, my endocrinologist, and it was about the issue with my needles, where, you know, they couldn't get the 1-inch needles, so they needed to know if a 1.5-inch needle would be fine. And by the way, an 1.5-inch long needle being stabbed into your leg is like the most wrong looking thing in the world. And the thing that works for me with that is getting up like super early, so that I just like, I don't even remember it, like it's perfect. Anyway, so they were calling me about that, and this doctor's office in particular has been really fantastic about using my preferred name all the time, every time they interact with me, and it's been actually really, really, really great. Except this time, when they called me, I don't know if whoever called me didn't get the memo, but they dead named me on the phone, and honestly, like, it's super frustrating, because there are some days where I feel like this name is going to follow me to my grave, and I'm never gonna get away from it, because it's on everything, because I built my entire life around this name. And I didn't do myself any favors in that regard either. Like, most of my usernames for most of the services that I was using on the internet were using my nickname in my username. And most places do not let you change your username. So, like, the denial was super strong, not gonna lie. Seriously, I was so aggressive about using my name everywhere that I kind of wonder if I was like trying to convince myself that I was this person. But now everything's kind of flipped. You know, like that name is not my name. It is just not my name. It does not refer to me as a person. That is not the name that corresponds to this person. And, you know, in addition to that, the vampires, that's what I call the lab that does my blood work. The vampires are like terrible about this. They called out to a lobby full of people my birth name. There's nowhere for me to put my preferred name on any form or anything. And I showed up presenting female because honestly, I don't have a choice at this point. Like, so they were like, oh, your name? And I was like, yeah, if you can believe it, that's me. And thankfully everybody there was like cool or whatever, but that's like literally a safety issue. That is actually dangerous because you have just outed me in a fairly conservative area, keep in mind, to all these people. Like, now they know that this woman is trans. And some people have a problem with that because they're not cool. But no, really, it's a serious safety issue, and they just were not, and I told them, I'm like, hey, you need to address this, this is unsafe, someone's gonna get hurt, and you're gonna get sued. And they just did not care at all. They're like, well, it's the name on your insurance, so we can't really do anything about it. And I was like, yes, you can. I'm a programmer. Don't tell me you can't handle this technically. It is very, very possible to handle this. You just don't want to. And I hate to say it, but I kind of worry that it's going to take someone actually getting hurt for this to be changed, and that's ridiculous. Anyway, between those two things happening, I realized that, especially since after coming out at work, I went full-time because who else was I hiding from? You know, and physical changes, again, kept it kind of not possible to really present masculine. Like, I really think I'd actually struggle to present masculine at this point in my transition. Not just emotionally, but physically. Like, I think I would have to bind, probably, or wear very thick sweatshirts. So I kind of reached a breaking point, and I just spontaneously took off a day, and I went to file paperwork with the county clerk's office that I had filled out like months ago. Everything was all ready to go. I just didn't have the impetus to do it for some reason. And a curious thing happened. They gave me an index number. I walked over to the courthouse, and before I knew it, I was in front of a judge. You know, fortunately I was dressed for like a courtroom, but I was not emotionally braced for that. And like, they didn't actually even see me. They just had the judge sign the order while they were doing some, you know, trying some other case or whatever. But like, you know, every single person that I encountered with that took one look at me, especially presenting female, and was like, oh, yeah, no, we need to fix this. Which of course was super validating to me because like, people find me plausible, which is amazing. I don't believe it, my dysphoria tells me otherwise, but So yeah, I mean, all told, in like 3 hours, I walked out of that courthouse with my court order for my name change, which was fantastic. Totally unexpected. I really didn't think it would happen all in one day, and of course it didn't. There's a lot more that happens after that. They made me publish my name change in the newspaper, which is, again, a dangerous thing to make a trans person do, because it's like, hey, this person with a male name who lives in this town is now going to be legally known as female name. Tell your friends! Fortunately, what I told myself is that no one reads this section of the paper, so it doesn't matter, and either way, there's no real way that I can, like, go back on it. Apparently there was something I was supposed to do. I should have, like, put in a request in writing or something, but I didn't know how to do that. I'm not a lawyer, so the bottom line is I ended up having to publish my name change in a paper, which again is really not safe. But I also couldn't really argue that I was going to be in any real danger from it, since my transition is obviously very public. So yeah, that took a while. I had to, you know, pay to publish my name change in the paper and all that, and then wait for an affidavit of publication to come in, and then take that to the courthouse, which I did, and then get certified copies of my court order, which I did, and then I decided to, that day, go to the DMV. So it turns out that my driver's license was actually expiring in 2 months. And between that and the fact that it was completely useless as an ID, I really did need to address this problem. Seriously, it had the wrong height, the wrong eye color, my parents' address on it, like, everything about my license except the fact that I'm an organ donor and my date of birth is completely wrong. And the photo and the gender were completely useless to me because nobody looking at that ID would look at me and think, oh, this is the same person. If you think that's bad, you should see my passport photo. It's up on my Instagram. It's really bad. So I gathered all the documents that I needed, and I needed a letter from my therapist to change the gender marker on my license. So that was very easy because I see my therapist every week and she was waiting for this, like this is a thing. So yeah, I walked out of the DMV after a 2-hour wait, and watching them try to feed the court order through a feeder scanner when it's stapled. I don't know how they thought they were going to get page 2 to read through the feeder scanner while it's stapled, but that became the copy that I made a scanned copy of so that I could use digitally, because apparently you're not supposed to take the staple out. Apparently, like, that's part of the legitimacy of the court order copy or whatever. I don't know, it's a government issue staple. It's probably magic. Yeah, so they basically destroyed one of my court orders, and I'm trying not to think about that, but the point is that that's one thing down. So in that same day, I went to my insurance agent and, we updated the insurance policy and everything, so now that's all in the correct name and the correct gender and all of that, and that's all good to go. The DMV also did the registration on my car, the title on my car, like everything automotive is now all set. Like and today actually, I received my photo license in the mail. I hate the photo, which means that it's correct. So yeah, I now have a state-issued photo ID with my correct name, gender, and photo on it, and that is such a relief. This is one of the points in my transition where I'm actually allowing myself to celebrate, because there's a lot of like integral steps along the way, and if I celebrate every single one, they'll kind of lose meaning, but this is a big one. This is major. I no longer have to present an ID that doesn't match who I am and just kind of hope that I'm not gonna get, like, killed. It is a massive, massive relief to me to not have to deal with that, and it's just one thing down and only a few more to go. With this ID, I was actually also able to update the name and gender on my health insurance, which actually was way less effort than I thought I was going to have to put into this, but has still turned out to be kind of a pain. Because now that the name on my insurance policy has changed, I now have to call all of my doctors and change all the names on the appointments so that they bill the correct name when they file the claim with the insurance company, otherwise they won't get paid and I'll get a bill and it'll be a big mess. So I called the vampires, who again were the worst ones in this whole process so far, and I said to them, "Hi, I need to change the name on my appointment." And they said, "We can't do that." And I'm like, okay, well, no questions, just no like why you need to do that, what's the situation, no who are you, no being treated like a human, just no. And I said, "No, you don't understand. If you use the other name, it will not match what is on my insurance policy. You need to update it in your system. You need to change this." So they told me, "Oh, well, you're gonna have to come in." And I was like, okay. They probably want to see a photo ID and my new insurance card with the correct name on it that is not what it was before. And I'm like, okay, I have those things, but like they wanted me to come in before the appointment. I'm like, I'm trying to save you time. You're making this more complicated than you need to. I'll just show up the day of my appointment and you'll figure it out by the time you send a bill, because otherwise you're not gonna get paid. So yeah, that's super frustrating. The next most frustrating thing that I have to deal with is my Social Security. They require a letter not from a therapist, explicitly not from a therapist. They want it from a medical doctor. And this is a thing that seems to be the case with all the remaining documents. I need this for my birth certificate with New York State, I need this for my passport, and I need this for my Social Security, and of course, all three of them have different requirements for this letter, but they all have to come from a doctor. Now, technically, I don't actually see a doctor. I see a nurse practitioner. I don't know if that counts, but we're gonna find out. Either way, there is a doctor in that office who I can see, who can fill out all of this for me. It's something I'm going to be able to achieve, but the point is that it's bogus. Like, if you really break it down, the way that this actually works is I told my therapist that I'm a woman, she confirmed that in her professional opinion, and diagnosed me with gender dysphoria. Now, that therapist, based on what I told her, sends me to a doctor to give me my hormones. And that doctor, who sees me once every 3 months, not my therapist who initially diagnosed me and sees me every week, has to send a letter. And the thing is that this is a carryover from a time where you actually had to have bottom surgery in order to change your gender marker, because they refuse to see you as the other gender unless you change parts, which is totally ridiculous. But I have come to accept that there are certain things that are going to be part of my process through my transition that I cannot fix. I cannot fix that the vampires do not have this system. As much as I might complain about it and tell them they need to fix it and talk about my own safety and send them research and do whatever I want to do with that, as much as I might want to argue with the Social Security Administration, the bottom line is these are the rules that exist. And I should be thankful that there is a way to do it at all, because there used to not be, and I need to be thankful for all the people that came before and fought for that for me. But for me, for now, what I need to do is just work within the system that does exist, that is something I can actually achieve to get what I need. And fix it later. For everybody else who comes after me who's gonna have it easier, you're welcome. So anyway, I have to obtain those letters so I can go to those places and get those things fixed. But the way I see it, I am now at least halfway done with this. This really is mostly done legally, which is fantastic. I cannot believe I've gotten as far as I have in like 2 months. I was expecting much more of a fight. And that is pretty much it as far as actual transition news is concerned. You know, I mean, things are moving along at their own pace. I don't really control that. You know, once I'm through all this name change stuff, I can revisit the issue of whether or not I'm going to get some kind of bottom surgery. Because in terms of lead time, that's about how long it would take for me to get ready to actually do it by the time I could earliest do it with my insurance covering it. So it's a thing I have to be thinking about, but I'm just kind of like, let's get through all of this first. This is a lot of stuff that we need to get through first. But yeah, things are moving along. I still feel great, aside from the exhaustion and the soreness and all the other fun things that come along with puberty. And you know, the other thing I've noticed, and I don't know how much of this is psychological or hormonal or what, but especially since adding the progesterone, I really do feel like my body has kind of figured out that I should be on a 28-day cycle. And so in addition to having the ups and downs from my injections every 2 weeks, every 4th week I seem to go really into the territory of like, this is PMS. Like, there's nothing else to call it at that point. Like, I have most of the symptoms of a woman who is experiencing PMS, and I obviously don't get periods, but you know, I do get some cramping, I do get some gastric effects, I do have all those same kinds of symptoms, you know, just generally feeling sore and achy and irritable, and you know, I don't know what else to call it. That's what it is. I'm a woman, and my hormones have a cycle, and you know, frankly, every person has some kind of cycle based on whatever their body's hormone levels they're producing are. I'm doing mine very artificially, obviously, but whatever it is, my body seems to have really latched onto this idea. But yeah, that is definitely a thing that I have been noticing, and again, I don't know how real that is, but it's a thing that a lot of us report, especially those of us who do the injections, and yeah, it's not exactly fun, but it's also like really super validating to feel like at least I have something in common with other women. You know, it's nice. I don't get all that I want with it, obviously, and I know it sounds really weird to say that I want a period, but like, I'm a woman, most women have periods, it's a thing that I can't have, you know? But at least I get something, yay! You know, I get to feel like terrible too. You know, and it's sort of that thing where, again, like talking about puberty and all of this and all of that, it's you know, it is painful, it is exhausting, it is a lot, and I don't really want to be going through it, but I have to say it's a heck of a lot better than I felt going through the other puberty that I went through in my life, and I feel a lot better. Like, all of these changes that are happening to me are things that I desperately wanted and felt that were missing from my life, and now I finally get to experience them, and yeah, it's a pain sometimes, but also it's right, and I don't know how to explain that, and it's kind of hard to explain in a way that doesn't sound completely crazy, but I don't know, this is what my body was meant to do, always, and it's about damn time. And that is all for this video. I'll be back again next week with another video that I hope you'll find interesting, not transition related. I am trying to keep that to once a month. But until then, stay curious.